Mind Control with Chase Hughes. So let's discuss really quickly the process of the mind control process that a cult uses. And this is, according to me, this is not some nationally recognized formula. So step one would typically, in most people's eyes, be selection of candidates, so selecting recruits. But from what we learned on this call at the beginning of the call, there's one thing that's more important than selecting recruits. It's selecting who your recruiter is. So we're asking ourselves, who is the person who is capable of doing this? So if I need to talk a highly intellectual CEO into joining a dangerous cult, it has to be a certain type of person who gets that done. There's not many people that can get that done unless they have X, Y, and Z type of personality traits. So selecting the recruiter would be the first. So if we're doing that and we're in a therapy position or we're in some kind of a sales position, we're asking ourselves first, what kind of person is capable of making the changes in other people that I want to make? Who would I have to become? Second would be something we might call target selection or recruit selection. And when we're selecting a target or a recruit, we're looking for, I would say the number one thing to look for is suggestibility. That people who are suggestible are probably easier to talk to. Let me bring this document up. So some of these qualities, depending on what I'm doing. So the recruit quality for a highly dangerous cult and highly toxic cult might target a certain type of people. We're going to target people that have SSRI prescription very recently. They have a recent family death, a history of mental illness, a recent divorce or the end of a relationship. They have a history of seeking help from suicide hotlines or counselors, a recent loss of credit or money. They have a historically limited number of close friends. I'm looking for detachment from families and loved ones, a desire for notoriety or physical affection, a history of physical or sexual abuse, a strong desire for self-expression. We can see this on someone's online news feed. And somewhat of a heightened disconnection or a more than usual disconnection from friends and family at work or at school. And during this phase, like the recruiter would select several people, reach out to them on social media or approach them directly in public, and they would probably modify their appearance, their demeanor, and their behavior to suit the ideal friend role of the person that they're talking to. And the candidates that respond well on the social stability scale in my book or whatever scale you'd like to use would be selected for further contact. So the next part is called love bombing. And once they get into this group, and it might just be a small thing at first, it could be an evening seminar. It could be a webinar to where you're starting the brainwashing and recruitment process while the person's sitting on their couch at home on a Zoom call. An evening seminar, a little weekend retreat where everybody's sitting on the beach, just a one-night thing. So this is the foot in the door technique, followed by the love bombing. And the love bombing is something that takes place there. It's a lot of physical, verbal, and emotional affection portrayed towards that person, absolutely made to excrete oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine. And for those of you who are not aware, the massive dump of oxytocin that a woman experiences during childbirth is the leading cause of her feeling loving feelings towards her baby, like the attachment and love feelings. Oxytocin is responsible for a lot of that. So the cult is probably unknowingly manufacturing oxytocin in the person they're talking to. Excuse me. So next we have a phase called consequences. In the consequences phase, the person is introduced to rules and regulations. And in the consequences phase, they'll typically also be introduced to certain words or language that the outsiders, whoever they refer to as non-cult members, are not aware of on a general basis. So they have language and linguistics, secret ways of referring to things that people on the outside are not aware of. And they're also made aware of the consequences for inaction. And typically, this will just be an introduction to 3 or 4 things that they shouldn't be doing. This is not them telling that the laws of Scientology dictate that you do X, Y, and Z or you're excommunicated. There's nothing extreme is presented to them yet. Maybe start limiting this and start limiting this. Maybe start talking to your friends less. These people love you more. You've already seen evidence of that. Everybody here loves you. This is the place that you're supported. Your friends and family have never treated you like this. So why would you continue to have contact with them? So it's a gradual distancing from their support circle or their circle of friends. Following this is the actual consequence phase where they suffer a consequence. So we have a high. So we start with our liking of the cult here, and over time it starts spiking up. But then we drop it. The cult would drop it. And this is where the person has to suffer a consequence. They have to go dig a hole or do push-ups or do something that's not nice. And they get shunned a little bit. And this is what creates attentional addiction. That's my word for it. So probably can't Google that, but it creates the attentional addiction to the cult. What happens in the first 5 minutes of the movie Bambi? Anybody remember? You can Google this. Bambi's mom, this is in the children's movie. Bambi's mom gets shot through the heart and starts bleeding out. There's actual blood in the movie into the snow, and Bambi curls up into a little ball around her mom's neck as her mom is dying in the snow. First 5 minutes, kids' movie. We need that in order to feel that attentional captivity. Our attention is held by the ups and downs. And in hypnosis, this is referred to as fractionation, the continual up and down movement of emotion. And in the dating world, this technique alone is referred to as the most dangerous and predatory dating technique. Now I'm looking to see who's taking notes. Who's writing that down? So this technique is what like a manipulator would use to talk to a woman and make the conversation go up and down over and over again to have that roller coaster effect. And I've got a slide that talks about the introduction of fractionation into a conversation. And I think it really illustrates how everything fits together. I'll bring that up here. Here it is. So that roller coaster effect is very important. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I don't know how that happened either. I can't get the cameras out of the way. So this effect is really important because every time that we experience anything positive, the chemicals in our brain, the serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, those chemicals have what's called a half-life. So those chemicals in our brain get secreted by mostly the hypothalamus, and they go into our blood, not just the blood in your brain, they go in all over your body. But those chemicals dissolve over time. They break down inside of our bodies. So the emotion starts wearing off, and we need a break from positive experiences, which is why there's no such thing as a movie where it starts great at the beginning, then the guy wins the lottery, then he buys his dream home, and then it's the end of the movie. We never do that. Our brains are wired for story. Our brains are wired for conflict, tension, and suspense. Conflict, tension, and suspense. With those three things, we're making someone's attention stay on the story. And the reason being goes back 100 million years, 10 million years to evolutionary psychology. When we're sitting around a campfire and Grandpa Zork is telling us about a saber-toothed tiger that almost attacked him and how he got away, our brains are hardwired to focus on that, because the little kids who didn't listen to Grandpa's story about the tiger didn't live to have sex and have babies. And that's a big deal. So if we're in a conversation where everything is happening great the entire time, the conversation is bad because we don't give the chemicals an opportunity to experience half-life in the bloodstream. And that's what that is. And if you are in a conversation, this is not a manipulation tactic. If you remember the last time you had a wonderful conversation with another person, I'm willing to bet that this was one of the factors of it. So it's not technically a manipulation technique. It depends on the intent. So it's just like any technique. If you study for a job interview and go get a haircut, that's manipulation as well. If we change the way if we speak differently in a job interview than we do to our friends, that's manipulation. That's being artificial or fake. So it depends on the intent. So this is something that people use. I use this on a very regular basis. If you read phrase 7, and there's some people in here who have, you'll see that there's massive amounts of conflict and tension and then release. There's negative, I'm spiking cortisol, then the cortisol stress chemical has a half-life and it gets down to the bottom. Then it goes up. And now instead of cortisol, I have oxytocin going up. And then oxytocin experiences half-life, starts diminishing. Then we have some more conflict, more tension. So it's a consistent up and down motion. And that's what makes us, if you think of the last great book that you've read, this is one of the reasons that you liked it. Aside from identifying with characters and things like that, which is also a persuasion technique, the words are written well in a way that you're not aware there's an author. And this is something I learned when I was writing a book in conversation when we're talking about persuasion or influence. I took a class in writing from a very, very famous writer. And he said, the moment a reader realizes that there's an author at work, you've failed at your job. Your entire job is done. They'll put the book down, they'll take a break, because you have to compete. Nowadays, authors and writers, we have to compete with social media. While you're reading, if you bought a copy of Phrase 7 and you're reading the book, I've got to compete with the notifications that are going to come up on your phone. I have to compete with that as an author. But it's the same thing in conversation. We are competing with social media. And not just because someone's going to get a notification on their phone. We have to compete from an attentional perspective, that the person's attention span in 1945 was like 40 minutes. And in today's time, it's like 40 seconds. I'm paraphrasing, but there are studies for this, that we've got a lot more work to do. So when the book, Dale Carnegie published How to Win Friends and Influence People a while ago, I'm not sure when. It's one of the best-selling books of all time. It's a great primer. It's a great introduction to persuasion and influence and just being a decent human being, I think, and good to other people. But it was great back then because people would write each other's names down. They would write letters to each other. Our attention span was much longer. But now the tides have turned. And once our attention span shorts out, our brain has a patternistic, habitual process of deleting information that's not important. So we have a pattern of behavior. I'm scrolling through my Instagram newsfeed and scrolling that up. The moment a video or a photo or any post doesn't capture all my attention or is not interesting, it's gone and I'll never see it again. So that habitual, patternistic human behavior that's prevalent nowadays is still there in conversations. Even though your face is not a cell phone, they will automatically scroll past whatever you're saying if they feel like they've heard it before. They feel like it's boring. You're using too many words. You're using 100 words when 15 words will do. Any of those things make them automatically get into that mindset of losing focus. And focus in mind control, or no matter what you're doing, sales, presentation, therapy, or if you're a lawyer, focus is currency. Focus is currency. So we are competing with Facebook and Instagram, even if the person's phone is not sitting at the table in front of them. Their brain is still programmed to be on social media. We'll stop here. All right, now I can see everybody again. Was I sharing my screen? Did everybody see it? Okay. I had a couple of people ask. So that's that big important thing there. And in most situations, if you go back to everything that we talked about this entire time, since the beginning of our conversation, the beginning of this lecture on mind control, you'll notice one thing that's common throughout the entire series of events, and that's something called novelty. In all of these situations where a person behaves in a way that they never have before, it's because they're in a situation they've never before been in. So if we want behavior, we need to break the pattern. We talked about these scripts that people are running, and I can teach you 100%. I can teach you how to tell what the script is and exactly the words that'll break that script. But the moment that script is broken, we have something called novelty. If the brain senses that something is happening that's novel, it makes us more suggestible. Like we talked about, the pattern's interrupted, we become more suggestible, but novelty also drives focus. And I'll prove it to you. I want you to send yourself back 150,000 years ago. So you're living in a nomadic village between 70 and 150 people. You haven't showered in a long time. You stink, probably. A lot hairier, grosser. Every day you go out to collect berries, to go hunt, go kill animals, go fish down the same path, and you take the same path back to the village every day. So this day, you've got like 6 or 7 rabbits. You've got them tied on a vine. You're dragging them behind you. And you pass by the same bush every day on the way back. So this trail, it's a very quiet, peaceful day in the woods. Walking by this bush back to your village with the rabbits. And behind the bush, a stick snaps. How much of your attention is focused on your village? None. Your kids? Don't give a crap about your kids right now. Your brain's not even thinking about it. Your brain's thinking of nothing else than what is behind that bush. That new experience generated 100% focus on the new situation. And all the humans on earth have ancestors that looked behind the bush or that looked at the stick. Because the people that didn't care about the stick, their descendants don't exist. They don't have kids that are alive today. Their DNA disappeared. So we are programmed through millions of years to respond with novelty, to respond to novelty with focus. And with that novelty, what we really want to do, or what any cult would do, and what a good salesperson does, and what a great conversation entails, is an experience different than before. In any situation or any conversation that we want to be really good, we're going to make it a situation that the person hasn't encountered before. That's all. And the final thing, which we'll talk about, we're going to take a break, but I'm going to throw this up on the screen before we take a break. I don't think I'm still sharing my screen. Let me close down RedTube before I share the screen again here. So I got a couple of laughs there. All right. So right here, what you're looking at is the 6-axis model. So what we had on the screen there, these are the 6 elements that we really need to influence another person. So hopefully we're able to write it down or just formulate some kind of an understanding of it. That if we're looking at these 6 pillars, and I will
can't see it, Chase.
Start my camera. How's that?
That's it.
All right. So if we're looking at these 6 pillars, then we're looking at the 6 things the person needs to be influenced. And if your skills, your conversational skills, are good enough to level up just 3 of those, then you can persuade someone to change. Just 3, any 3. Doesn't matter which 3. We just need 3. But if we add in the bonus of novelty, and not just at the beginning, of course, at the beginning, it's helpful to generate focus because that's typically not something we experience in a conversation. So that novelty is very important. But those 6 things, we're looking at those 6 things. The vulnerability is first, and these are not in order of importance. Although excitement should be the one thing that takes place towards the end. So let's take a scenario. Since this is a mind control lecture, let's take a scenario that's completely hypothetical, where a person talks someone into doing something against the law. And in this scenario, the person approaches a target, and they selected their target, hopefully someone suggestible, but if they're not, they can work on that. But just the selection of the target, we start the conversation. He starts a conversation with the potential victim and uses what's called elicitation techniques to generate all kinds of things. Vulnerability, openness, and connection are all generated massively through the elicitation techniques that I teach. And the vulnerability moves up the more a person is willing to share personal information. And when we talk about openness, this is how willing a person is to discuss something they are insecure or fearful about. And the connection starts to develop the more the person feels like they're in rapport and they trust the person they're speaking to, the bad guy that they're talking to. And suggestibility goes up because the more open we are, the more suggestible we become. And there's a whole lot of other techniques that a person can use to ramp up the person's suggestibility before. And especially when any of you guys are going to take the practitioner course or any of those, you'll see a lot of these techniques that just massively ramp up suggestibility. That could be done in conversations as small as 5 minutes. And the focus is there because novelty is there. And the focus is also there because we can use linguistic techniques to make sure focus happens. There's certain phrases that we can use that make a person focus a lot more. And the excitement gets ramped up, not about the interaction per se. It doesn't have to be. But the excitement gets ramped up towards the end of the conversation because the person's excited about the outcome or the decision that we would like that person to make.